Hi campers, Jeff here. Today I want to tell you about a 3-day hike. It was 36 miles long. It was on the Pacific Crest Trail and Boundary Trails leading west through the Siskiyou Mountains to Oregon Caves National Monument. The hike was organized by the Siskiyou Mountain Club here in Southern Oregon. Weather conditions were clear and cool, very nice for hiking. A fellow hiker named Emily drove us up to the trailhead in the Siskiyous at Cook and Green Pass, which is on the Pacific Crest Trail. My fellow hikers were Nate, Carly, and Mary. When Emily drove away, we started out walking southward on the PCT following the ridge westward. About an hour into this ridge, we could catch glimpses of Red Butte ahead. It's one of the local landmarks in this area. Visibility was excellent because of rain the day before. As we hiked, Nate kept stopping to identify trees, and I was kind of grateful because otherwise it was hard to keep up with the 22-year-olds. Nate is studying forestry and has a test on tree identification coming up soon, and we were in an area of great biodiversity. There's a blur of tree species, all of which we saw along this hike. Douglas fir, true fir, white fir, Pacific yew, western hemlock, red cedar, incense cedar, white pine, sugar pine, Jeffrey pine, blue spruce, brewer's spruce, tan-bark oak, and on the slopes facing us we saw the red and orange of maples turning color in the fall. We saw one of the rare brewer's spruces with their droopy branches. The first place we saw it was near Echo Lake Trail. Nate explained about the pine and fir cones we were seeing on the ground. Some open their seeds and let their seeds out right away, while some stay closed and ooze sticky sap, which is flammable. That sticky, closed serotinous cone has to experience the heat of a forest fire before it will open. Talk about waiting till the last minute to do something really important. For lunch, we stopped near Lily Pad Lake. You can just catch a glimpse of it in the picture. I didn't get a very good one. We could easily see Mount Shasta, though, 100 miles to the south. And just for fun, I set up my Panasonic camera with a zoom lens, sitting on a tiny little tripod, and got a close-up of the distant peak covered in snow and wreathed in clouds. 5 miles into the PCT, we came to a junction with the Boundary Trail. Here the PCT comes up from the little town of Syed Valley and reaches the top of the Siskiyou Ridge. But the Boundary Trail continues west. We followed it westward with the Klamath River Valley on our left to the south and the Applegate River Valley to the north. During the afternoon, we sped down the nearly level, straight Boundary Trail on a nearly treeless ridge with great views in all directions. We passed by Kangaroo Mountain, Desolation Peak, and Rattlesnake Mountain. Great names for steep, rocky peaks. Stopped at Rattlesnake Spring, a usually dry seep on the mountainside, and took a break. By the way, note Mary's unusual pack with the storage on the front. In the background, you can see Mount Emily lying ahead of us near our goal, Lonesome Lake. 15 miles in, at about 5:30, we arrived at the lake with a granite wall of Figurehead Mountain looming behind it. There's still about an hour of daylight left. Camping isn't too easy around Lonesome Lake, so we were looking for campsites, and Carly almost immediately found a hand-carved wooden spoon on the ground by the lake. "I know who made this," she said, and she pulled out a similar hand-carved wooden spoon from a backpack. A friend of hers had lost it 2 years earlier while they were doing trail work in the area. "He'll be surprised to see it again," she said. We had to spread out in the tangled undergrowth to find anything resembling tent sites, but once settled in, we had a campfire near Nate's. We slept pretty well, and on day 2 we woke up to frost on our tents after a near-freezing night. I'd been trying to out a new sleeping bag rated for 30 degrees, really just a summer bag, but I was gratified to find out that it worked just as advertised and kept me warm enough. No complaints. Our goal for the day was Sucker Creek Gap, about 10 miles away. As we hiked westward, we dropped into Cedar Basin, full of big firs and pines, the headwaters of the Applegate River. We followed a creek, actually one branch of the Applegate, up to picturesque Azalea Lake. This very popular lake is close to several trailheads and has much better camping. We found it to be a great spot for a break. Some of them talked about a swim, but in October? Climbing out of Azalea Lake, we were on another ridge of the Klamath Range, this time going north from Figurehead Mountain. We passed by the more intriguing place names, Snake Lake, Phantom Meadows, mostly in very pleasant forests, and we had a view of Devil's Punch Bowl in the distance. This is a basin with a lake in it, much like Lonesome Lake, but perched oddly on a mountaintop. Our goal, Sucker Creek Gap, was 10 or 11 miles away, and we arrived mid-afternoon. The meadow behind Sucker Creek Gap is full of big old cedars, has a log shelter, plenty of good tent sites, and a water source. I did waste some time, though, trying to find the spring. It wasn't easy. It was a little seep near the bottom of the meadow, hidden under some rocks with just a few liters of water into it. But a spring keeps refilling, and we all got the water we needed by taking turns and made dinner. Then we collected firewood, put our warm clothes on, and stayed up till about 10 by a campfire in the shelter. Much of the conversation was about trail work. Here I should mention that the main activity of the Siskiyou Mountain Club isn't hiking, it's trail maintenance. They maintain hundreds of miles of hiking trails in southern Oregon, including the ones we were following on this trip. The Boundary Trail, the Lonesome Lake Trail, the Butte Fork Trail, the Fur Glade Trail, the Steve Fort Trail, the Sucker Gap Trail, the Boundary National Trail. The club raises money, trains trail workers, and pays for them to work all summer cutting away brush and down trees, gradually obscure the existing footpaths in these mountains. Just recently, I got to help out for a day on a side trail that leads right up here to Sucker Gap, where we were camped. Day 3, a little warmer. Seemed like a blur as we headed north on the Boundary National Trail, another fast one, mostly following a ridge. There was a 500-foot drop into Green Valley where we had snacks and filtered more water. And later we passed Horse Spring, but the water source there was not very appetizing, even by hiker standards. We had just enough to get it to the end at Oregon Caves. Today, though, the subject matter of Nate and Carly was mushrooms. They were everywhere, on the sides of trees, on fallen decaying logs underfoot. And Nate was learning to identify the edible species and had been collecting them by the bucket in his spare time. Carly scored a nice yellow chanterelle to take home with her. The most scenic part of the third day was Mount Elijah and the Caves Monument. We crossed the border of Oregon Caves National Monument, and then there were some switchbacks up the peak. Here the trail was exceptionally well cared for, a big Douglas firs. And just before the top, a spectacular view over the ridge and down to Bigelow Lake. Then on to the summit. We had 360-degree views, another really clear day. We were probably seeing most of the Klamath Range, which extends about 100 miles north of us and 100 miles south from where we stood. Then there was a long downhill, several miles to the Oregon Caves Visitor Center. We stopped to hug the big tree, one that has no top anymore, but is still very impressive at its base. Finally, we got to the Visitor Center just 5 minutes before it closed. The cave tour and the crazy-looking hotel there are really worth a visit. Been there several times before. We were 2 hours late for our rendezvous with another club member, Jerry. But he was happy to see us, drove us all back home, all tired but happy. Till the next hike, Jeff signing off.